About 3 years ago, I ran into a girl from my old neighborhood on a bus. Well, back then she was a girl. Now she was a striking young woman. When we were kids, we lived in a quiet suburb in one of those old, faded apartment blocks with peeling paint and wooden staircases that creaked in winter. Our yards merged into one big green courtyard where all the neighborhood children gathered. That's where I used to see Sarah almost every day. Later, she moved away to study. My family relocated too, and our connection simply dissolved. No dramatic goodbyes, no promises to stay in touch. Just life. And then, during that unexpected meeting on the bus, she told me something. Something that didn't fit her calm voice or warm smile. Something strange. Back then, Sarah lived next door to a young family with a little boy named Alex. Their bedrooms shared a thin wall so thin that the kids would tap on it late at night, sending simple codes to each other. A kind of secret friendship ritual. Sometimes they talked from their balconies too. The balconies were so close you could easily toss something from one to the other. It became their tradition, throwing small treasures across, little toys, candy wrappers, folded paper, secrets. I occasionally took part in those games when I visited Sarah. I still remember Alex's tiny pale hand stretching out from behind the railing, tossing something toward us with a shy smile, and how we laughed as we threw something back. But then school began. The courtyard games faded. They still saw each other, but less often. Sarah told me they even had a childhood crush, quiet, innocent, awkward. And their balcony tradition continued, only now the surprises were folded love notes instead of toys. And then she paused, and the story stopped being sweet. By the end of high school, my family had moved to another district. Sarah and I entered different universities, drifted apart, and didn't speak for years. And that's when I learned what had happened, what Sarah eventually told me that day on the bus. When she returned home after graduating, now a trained specialist ready to start her career, she barely thought about the old yard, the balcony games, or the boy next door. Her mind was full of resumes, interviews, adult life. Until one night, Sarah was lying in her childhood bedroom, unable to sleep when she heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping on the wall. Not the random creaks of an old building. A rhythm. A pattern. Familiar. Her childhood snapped back into focus with painful clarity. Alex. The wall-tapping games. Notes tossed across balconies like tiny messages in bottles. At first she froze, convinced she must have imagined it. But the tapping came again, 3 short knocks, 1 long. Exactly the pattern Alex used when he wanted her to come out to the balcony. A strange mix of guilt and nostalgia washed over her. She felt ashamed for not even thinking of him after returning. She told herself that tomorrow, no matter what, she would go next door and see him. In the morning, Sarah walked to the apartment door with a small smile, rehearsing what she would say. She rang the neighbor's doorbell. Once, twice. No answer. The apartment felt unnaturally still behind the door. Not wanting to give up, Sarah scribbled a short note. I'm back. I'd love to see you. She folded it into a little tube, just like the ones they used to throw, and placed it on Alex's balcony railing. A tiny piece of childhood returned to her as she did it. That night, Sarah dreamed of Alex. He was standing on his balcony, exactly where he had stood as a child, same posture, same thin smile, only now he looked wrong. His face was pale, almost grayish, as if drained of color. His eyes seemed too reflective, like he was looking through her instead of at her. Yet he smiled. And in the dream, Sarah felt a heavy, sinking dread as he raised his hand to wave. She woke up trembling. When she stepped onto her balcony the next morning, her breath caught in her throat. Scattered across the floor were dozens, maybe hundreds, of rolled-up paper tubes and candy wrappers. Too many to count. Some looked old and yellowed by time. Others seemed freshly placed, as if someone or something had been throwing them onto her balcony throughout the entire night. She tried to laugh it off. He's playing with me, she thought. Maybe he's shy. Maybe he's hiding. But deep down, Sarah felt a twinge of something colder. Something close to dread. When she asked her parents about the neighbors, they had nothing to tell her. They were long-haul truckers, always on the road, barely home enough to know who still lived in the building. Still, Sarah kept trying. For the next few days, she knocked on Alex's door again and again. Nobody ever answered. But every night, new wrappers appeared on her balcony. New little tubes of paper. Sometimes she heard tapping on the wall again, soft, patient, inviting. And sometimes, just as she drifted into sleep, she could swear she heard a faint whisper through the thin plaster, as if someone was standing on the other side of that wall, waiting. One afternoon, Sarah ran into an elderly woman who used to live below them. The same grandmotherly neighbor who constantly scolded the kids for dropping candy wrappers onto her balcony back in the day. To Sarah's surprise, the old woman immediately brightened when she saw her, as if genuinely happy to recognize a familiar face after so many years. "Come in for tea," the woman insisted warmly. Inside her apartment, almost nothing had changed. The same lace curtains, the same porcelain figurines, the same faint smell of lavender and dust. Sitting at the small kitchen table, Sarah didn't waste any time. She told her straight out that she'd been knocking on Alex's door for days, weeks, even, and nobody ever opened. She expected the grandmother to sigh and say something like, "Oh, he's probably away," or "he'll be back soon." Instead, the woman's expression froze. "My dear," she said slowly, "no one has lived in that apartment for a long time." Sarah blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. The old woman explained. Alex's father had passed away years ago. After that, Alex and his mother simply disappeared. No one knew where they went. They left the apartment locked up, untouched. Twice a year, a distant aunt came by to check on it, dust a little, make sure no pipes burst. But that was it. No life, no routine, just an empty shell. Sarah felt her stomach twist. She quickly told the grandmother that she had heard tapping on the wall recently, Alex's tapping. The same rhythm, the same exact pattern from their childhood. Something she would never mistake. The old woman only shrugged, the way people do when they don't want to think too deeply about something unsettling. 2 months passed. One morning, Sarah heard the distinct clatter of the neighbor's door unlocking. It was unmistakable, the deadbolt scraping, the door hinges complaining after long disuse. Her heart leapt. She rushed into the hallway. But instead of Alex or his mother, she found an older woman in a wide-brimmed hat, holding a tiny trembling dog. The woman had keys in her hand and was clearly just entering the abandoned apartment. Sarah greeted her quickly and, almost breathlessly, explained that she was trying to find Alex, that she had heard him, that she was sure he was there somehow. The woman with the dog gave her a cautious look, then stepped aside to let Sarah peer inside. The apartment was nearly empty. No furniture except a broken chair. No curtains. The wallpaper peeled in long curling strips like dead skin. A cold, stale, uninhabited smell drifted out, a mix of dust, old linoleum, and something else, something like forgotten grief. It was painfully clear that no one had lived there for a very, very long time. Sarah must have looked bewildered, maybe even frightened, because the woman invited her inside and closed the door behind them with a soft thud. She spoke quietly, as if sharing something she didn't often say aloud. After the father passed, Alex's mother became very ill. The boy took it terribly. He was always a sensitive one. When her illness worsened, he decided to take her to relatives in another state. Somewhere near the sea, he said. Thought it might help her breathe easier, might help her get better. But she didn't. Within a couple of years, Alex's mother died as well. And Alex, Sarah whispered. She didn't know why she whispered, but the apartment seemed to demand it. The woman shook her head. No one knows what happened to him after that. He just vanished. Stopped writing. Stopped calling. The relatives assumed he needed time. But years passed. And there was nothing. Sarah stood in the hollow, abandoned apartment, surrounded by silent walls that once echoed with childhood laughter and tapping codes in the night. Now the walls held only emptiness. And yet, sometimes when Sarah pressed her palm to the wallpaper, she swore she could feel something faint on the other side. A soft, deliberate tapping. For days after speaking with the aunt, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Yes, the apartment was empty. Yes, the family had vanished. But the tapping she heard wasn't some random phantom noise. It was exactly Alex's pattern. 3 short knocks, 1 long. Their childhood signal for come to the balcony. She couldn't believe that was a coincidence. And the wrappers, the neatly rolled tubes on her balcony floor. Who would do that if not him? The more she thought about it, the more a single idea consumed her. Alex had come back. Maybe quietly, without telling anyone. Maybe hiding. Maybe hurting. She imagined him turning the key to the empty apartment late at night, too overwhelmed to reconnect with the world. She imagined him tapping on the wall, waiting for her to answer. And she felt horribly, painfully guilty for not being there sooner. So she began to search. The search. Sarah asked neighbors, those who still lived in the building, those who remembered the family. Most shrugged. Some barely recalled Alex. But one woman on the 4th floor frowned deeply when Sarah mentioned his name. "I thought I saw someone on that balcony a few weeks ago," the woman said slowly. "Late at night. Looked like a young man, but when I blinked, he was gone." Sarah's pulse quickened. She started asking shops nearby, old schoolmates, anyone who might have seen him. She visited the old park they used to play in. She looked through social media, old phone numbers, even online missing person groups. Nothing. No photos. No profiles. No trace of a man named Alex whose mother had died near the sea. It was as if he had dissolved into the air. But the tapping on the wall continued. Always at night. Always patient. Always inviting. And every morning, more wrappers appeared on her balcony, some brand new, some faded and brittle, as if they'd been tossed from a place where time didn't flow normally. The breakthrough. One evening, driven by a mix of dread and determination, Sarah went back to the aunt's apartment and asked if she knew the address of the relatives who had taken Alex and his mother in. The aunt hesitated, then gave her the address. It was a rundown coastal town several states away. Sarah left the very next morning. The journey felt unreal, empty highways, fog rolling across fields, a sky the color of old steel. When she finally reached the small coastal town, she found the house easily. It was pale blue, weather-worn, leaning slightly to one side from years of ocean winds. An older man opened the door. When Sarah said the name Alex, his expression changed immediately. Not confusion, not surprise, but something closer to fear. He invited her inside. The air smelled faintly of salt and medicine. And in a quiet, trembling voice, he told her the truth. The truth about Alex. After Alex brought his mother to the coast, her illness worsened faster than anyone expected. Doctors were helpless. The woman faded day by day, and Alex never left her side. When she died, something in him broke. He stayed in the room with her body for nearly 3 days before the relatives found him. He barely spoke afterward. Barely ate. One night, without a word, he walked into the ocean. They found his body the next morning. He had been dead for years. The man finished speaking and lowered his eyes, unable to look at her. Sarah felt her world tilt. Her throat closed. Her vision blurred. "But no," she whispered. I heard him. He tapped on the wall. He sent notes. He stood on the balcony. I saw him." The old man shook his head slowly. "Child, whatever you heard, whatever you saw, it wasn't Alex." When Sarah finally found the courage to come back, with her parents, and later the building manager, her room was exactly as she had left it. The wall was dry. No footprints. No wrappers. No notes. Except one. A single paper tube lay on her pillow. Crisp. Perfect. New. Not hers. With trembling hands, she unrolled it. It contained one line, written in the same childlike handwriting Sarah remembered all her life. I'm still here. There was no tapping that night. No shuffling. No whispers. Only silence. A silence that felt patient. As if someone, was waiting just beyond the thin wall. And sometimes, when Sarah lies awake in the dark, she could swear she hears the faintest sound beneath the surface of the plaster. A soft inhale, a quiet exhale, and the promise of 3 short taps. One long. Any night now, he will call her again.